The galaxy was at peace, or so it seemed. The Seraphians, an ancient race with superior technology, had long since cemented their rule over the stars. Their warships, sleek and deadly, prowled the edges of the galaxy, ensuring that their dominion was unchallenged. Civilizations had bowed to them, and resistance was but a distant memory. In the center of this sprawling empire, the Seraphians felt invincible, the rulers of the universe. But that was before the signal came. It was a fleeting anomaly at first, just a whisper at the edge of their monitoring systems. For weeks, the Seraphians ignored it, attributing it to cosmic interference or a malfunction in their equipment. But the signal didn't fade. It grew stronger, more deliberate, as if it were calling out. And it was coming from deep within uncharted space, a place even the Seraphians had never dared to explore. In the command chambers of Seraphian High Command, the atmosphere grew tense. Commander Thaurin, one of the most respected officers in the fleet, studied the data on his console. "This isn't a mistake," he muttered under his breath, his dark eyes narrowing. The signal was repeating, not in random bursts, but in a complex pattern, structured, intelligent. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. His thoughts raced, but he knew there was only one course of action. The fleet had to investigate. Within hours, he had dispatched a small group of ships, including the state-of-the-art Seraphian flagship, Ardent Judgment, commanded by the legendary Admiral Kor. They were sent to the coordinates, a place known as the Silent Expanse, a region of space that had been untouched for eons, a place where even Seraphians dared not tread. As the fleet approached, the tension in the command deck was palpable. The stars around them were unusually dim, their light flickering like a dying ember. Nothing in this sector had ever felt right, but the signal felt different. It felt like a presence, like something was watching them. "Admiral," Thaurin's voice crackled through the comm. "We're closing in on the source." Kor, standing at the helm, gripped the armrests of his command chair. He was no stranger to danger, but this was something new. "What's our status on the signal?" he asked, his voice cold but tinged with a sense of unease. "The signal's coming from a massive structure," Thaurin replied, his tone tense. "It's not like anything we've seen before. It appears to be a ship, but it's enormous, far beyond any Seraphian design, and it's not responding to our hails." Kor's mind raced. A ship, here, in the Silent Expanse. This wasn't just a signal, it was an invitation. He turned to his officers. "Prepare for a full scan. Deploy our forward teams. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we make contact." The fleet slowed as they reached the coordinates, and what lay before them sent a chill through even the most battle-hardened Seraphian veterans. A massive ship, unlike anything they had ever seen, hung in the void. Its form was sleek, almost too perfect, and yet there was something unsettling about it. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, reflecting the faint light of distant stars in unnatural hues. There was no sign of movement, no detectable energy readings, nothing to suggest any activity. Yet the presence was undeniable. And then, as if to answer their unspoken question, the ship's surface began to ripple, its hull seemingly alive, pulsing with a strange energy. The Seraphian ships went silent, every crew member staring in disbelief at the sight. The air in the command chamber felt thick, heavy with anticipation. And then, without warning, a pulse of energy, soft at first, shot from the mysterious vessel, rippling through the fabric of space itself. The pulse didn't seem to have a physical presence, but the consequences were immediate. The stars around them dimmed. The nearby galaxy seemed to flicker like a dying flame. And in that instant, the Seraphians realized what they were dealing with. Not just a ship, but something far older, far more powerful than they had ever imagined. Before anyone could react, the pulse grew stronger, and a wave of dread washed over the fleet. The ship wasn't just calling them, it was warning them. But what What was waiting for them in the silent void of space? The signal had come, and now, as they stood on the brink of something far beyond their comprehension, the first question echoed in Kor's mind. Was this humanity's arrival, or something far darker, waiting to take the stars for itself? The galaxy was about to learn that its peace had been a lie. The pulse of energy from the mysterious warship still lingered in the air, hanging like a specter over the Seraphian fleet. Admiral Kor stood motionless at the helm of ardent judgment, his eyes fixed on the strange vessel ahead. His hands gripped the edges of his command chair, the cold metal grounding him as he struggled to process what he was seeing. The stars surrounding them no longer seemed like distant beacons. They felt like flickers on the verge of extinction. "Admiral," Thauron's voice broke through the heavy silence. "The energy readings, they're off the charts. It's as if the ship is drawing power from the very fabric of space itself." Kor's jaw tightened. He had never felt a sense of vulnerability like this before. The Seraphians had conquered galaxies with their might and technology. They were feared throughout the universe. But this ship was an enigma. It was silent, motionless, yet it commanded the space around it with a strange, almost predatory presence. "Status report on the fleet," Kor asked, his voice steady but betraying the hint of unease he felt inside. "We're holding steady, Admiral," came the reply. "All ships are in position, awaiting your orders." Kor nodded, though he wasn't sure what to command. Every instinct told him to strike, to destroy this unknown threat before it could act. But something in his gut told him this ship was no ordinary enemy. Its stillness was more menacing than any weapon. It was waiting for them to make the first move. "Maintain formation," Kor finally ordered. "We move forward. Let's see if this thing will communicate." The fleet inched forward, their massive warships cutting through the void like shadows in the darkness. As they neared the alien vessel, a strange sensation washed over the crew. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end, and their skin tingled with an unknown energy. It wasn't just the ship. They could feel something else, something ancient, something alive within the space around them. Then, without warning, the warship before them shifted. It wasn't a movement in the traditional sense. There was no propulsion, no thrust. Instead, the very fabric of space around the ship seemed to bend, rippling like water disturbed by an unseen force. The Ascendant was alive in ways the Seraphians couldn't begin to comprehend. A flash of light erupted from the vessel's hull, bright and blinding. The Seraphian ships attempted to shield their eyes, but the light pierced through their defenses, illuminating their command decks with an eerie glow. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and the universe itself felt like it was holding its breath. Then the light receded, and the Ascendant was gone, vanished. No warning, no sound, just empty space where a moment before there had been an enormous warship. Kor's heart pounded. The fleet had been perfectly positioned. There had been no sign of movement, no indication that the vessel had gone anywhere. And yet, it had disappeared. Where did it go? Thauron asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and mounting panic. Kor didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, calculating possibilities, none of which made sense. This was impossible. No technology in the universe should be able to make a ship disappear without a trace, certainly not with the ease this one had displayed. "Scan the area," Kor barked, his voice sharp with command. "Track its energy signature. Track its heat emissions, whatever you can find." But as the seconds dragged on, a sinking feeling settled in. The scans returned nothing. Not a single trace. Not even a ripple in the fabric of space where the Ascendant had once been. Kor felt his blood run cold. "It's not just a ship, it's something else," he murmured to himself. Then, in the dead silence that followed, the comms officer suddenly reported, his voice shaking. "Admiral, we're picking up something. Faint. Very faint." Kor's pulse quickened. "What is it?" The officer's words were barely audible. "Another signal. It's It's coming from behind us. The entire fleet turned in unison, their eyes scanning the darkness. But nothing was there. Nothing except the abyss. The silence stretched on, each second dragging like an eternity. The stars, once shining brightly, were now nothing but dim flickers. The Ascendant was somewhere out there, watching, waiting. And the Seraphians, masters of the stars, were no longer sure if they were the hunters or the hunted. Cord gripped the armrest of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. The universe had changed. The silence was no longer just a void. It was a warning. Admiral Cord stood at the center of the command deck, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The Ascendant, that ship, had vanished without a trace, slipping through their grasp like smoke. But there was no time for doubt. The Seraphian fleet had already suffered a devastating blow to their pride and confidence. The Ascendant had not only destroyed their scout fleet in an instant, but had also warped the very fabric of space around them. And now it was gone, leaving only the eerie echo of its energy pulse lingering in the void. "Admiral," Thaurin said, his voice taut with frustration, "our scans are still coming up empty. There's nothing left of the ship. Nothing to track. It's as if it never existed at all." Thor clenched his jaw. He had never encountered an adversary like this. The Seraphian Empire had faced hostile species, rebellions, and galactic threats, but this was different. This wasn't an invasion. It was an annihilation. "Report," Kor said, turning to his officers. The silence in the room was thick, and the fear palpable, but there was no time for hesitation. Kor had to act. He had to know what they were dealing with before it was too late. "We've lost contact with several of our listening posts along the frontier," Thaurin reported, his voice steady, but tinged with concern. "The signal from the Ascendant. It seems to be spreading. The farther we get from its last known location, the more distorted our systems become." The implications of that were terrifying. The Ascendant wasn't just a ship. It was a disturbance, a force of nature that twisted reality itself. And yet, the Ascendant was only one ship. A single unknown vessel had crippled the Seraphian fleet, and now they were blind. Kor's mind clicked into action. "Send out a distress signal to all remaining fleets," he ordered. "Deploy the full force of the Seraphian military. I want every ship in our arsenal, no matter how far-flung, brought to full readiness. We're going to flush this thing out." The crew worked quickly, issuing orders, making preparations, and coordinating with ships across the galaxy. A massive wave of Seraphian forces would soon be headed to confront this mysterious human warship. There was no more room for uncertainty. They would hunt it down, and they would destroy it. As the fleet began to mobilize, Kor's thoughts shifted to what he had learned from their previous encounter. This wasn't just about firepower. The Ascendant had displayed capabilities beyond anything the Seraphians had in their arsenal. Its technology bent the laws of physics and erased space itself. It was a weapon unlike any other, and Kor had to find a way to counter it. "Admiral," came a voice from the tactical station, breaking his train of thought. "We've received a new transmission." Kor's eyes narrowed. "From whom?" The officer paused, eyes widening in disbelief. It's from the Ascendant, Admiral. It's speaking to us." A cold chill ran down Kor's spine. The Ascendant had never communicated directly before, not even when it destroyed their scout fleet. The last time the signal had reached them, it was a pulse of destructive energy. Now it was something else entirely. Kor stepped forward, his hand steadying on the edge of the console. "What is it saying?" The officer hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to speak the words aloud. It's human." The word rang out, the full weight of it settling over the room. Human. That single word, simple but inexplicably powerful, sent a ripple of disbelief through the Seraphian command. Kor's voice was low, but sharp. "Play the transmission." The officer complied, and the room fell silent. The static cleared, and a voice crackled through the speakers. It was calm, almost eerily so, with an authority that sent a shiver through the crew. "This is Captain Ilara Vance of the Ascendant. To the Seraphian Empire, your arrogance has blinded you to the inevitable. Humanity has come, and we are here to bring order to this galaxy, an order of our making. Your time is over. The stars are ours." The transmission ended, leaving nothing but an unsettling stillness in its wake. The crew stood frozen, absorbing the words that had come from the Ascendant. Kor's gaze hardened. "Order the fleet to assemble. Now." He could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on him, and he knew the stakes had escalated beyond anything he had prepared for. This was no longer just a war. It was a reckoning. The Ascendant was not just a ship. It was a message, and it had come to shatter everything the Seraphians believed about their place in the galaxy. The hunt had begun. The transmission from Captain Ilara Vance had left a mark on every soul aboard the Seraphian fleet. The words had been simple, but the weight they carried was immense. Humanity has come. The thought alone felt like a cosmic threat, an inevitable shift in the balance of power that had governed the galaxy for centuries. Admiral Kor paced the command deck of Ardent Judgment, his boots clicking against the cold metal floor with each step. His mind churned with calculations and tactics, but no strategy he had ever devised seemed adequate against this new foe. Humanity. They were a fledgling species, barely a blip on the galactic map, and yet their warship, the Ascendant, had wiped out a fleet of seasoned Seraphian ships with an ease that defied explanation. "Admiral, we've received word from the outer fleet." Thauron's voice broke through his thoughts. "They're ready to engage, but there's something strange. Our allies are reporting that the pulse from the Ascendant, it's spreading faster than anticipated. Some sectors are already experiencing a total blackout in communications and systems." Kor's gaze turned to the main viewport, where the stars hung in a sea of endless black. The silence of space, once comforting, now felt oppressive. The Ascendant was still out there, hiding in the shadows, its presence like a ticking bomb, waiting for the right moment to strike. "How much longer before they reach us?" Kor asked, trying to steady his voice. Thauron hesitated before replying. "We have 2 hours at most before the remaining fleet's rendezvous. The pulse is disrupting everything, even our advanced systems. We're losing track of our own ships." Kor's fist clenched. They were being hunted, cut off from all communication, isolated, and unaware of where the Ascendant might strike next. It was a strategy that played on every Seraphian's deepest fear: vulnerability. Suddenly, the tactical officer's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Admiral, we've detected a new anomaly. A large mass is approaching rapidly from the outer edges of the sector. It's the Ascendant. It's moving." Kor's heart raced as he snapped his head toward the screen. There in the distance, a blur of shifting shadows broke the stillness. The Ascendant had appeared, but not as a ship. This time, it was a force of nature, distorting the very fabric of space around it, creating an eerie visual mirage. One moment, it was there, enormous and dominating, and the next, it seemed to slip between dimensions, fading in and out like a phantom. "Hold position," Kor barked. "Weapons hot, shields at full strength. Prepare to engage." His words died in his throat as the Ascendant launched a ripple of energy across the fleet. The shockwave wasn't just physical. It reverberated through their minds, a psychic force that clawed at their consciousness. Crew members doubled over in pain, clutching their heads, their minds overwhelmed by a wave of alien thought. Kor staggered, feeling the weight of the wave hit him like a sledgehammer. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he could swear he saw human faces flicker across his mind's eye, their expressions filled with something that could only be described as pity. "Admiral, the fleet is," Thauron gasped, his voice barely audible over the roar of the pulse. The command deck shook violently as the Ardent Judgment was rocked by the shockwave. "Activate countermeasures. Now," Kor shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. But it was too late. The Seraphian ships were already starting to fracture, their systems crumbling beneath the relentless onslaught of the Ascendant's pulse. One by one, their shields flickered and died, their weapon systems short-circuiting. The Ardent Judgment was losing power, its engines sputtering, its weapons useless. It felt as though the very heart of the Seraphian fleet was being ripped out, piece by piece, and they were helpless to stop it. Kor's mind was spinning. There was no strategy left. No contingency plan. This wasn't just a war. It was a massacre. And then, through the haze of pain and panic, something caught his attention. Something extraordinary. On the far side of the viewport, faint but unmistakable, another figure appeared. A warship, smaller than the Ascendant, but powerful in its own right, with sleek lines that glinted in the dying light of the stars. It was human, unmistakably so. The human warship came into full view, sliding into the edge of the battle like a shadow. It was Ardent Judgment's twin in every way. But this one was different. Its energy readings were wild, volatile. It was no longer just the Ascendant threatening them. It was humanity itself, unleashing something far darker, far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Kor's heart skipped a beat. The galaxy had never known a force like this. Humanity was no longer just a threat. They were the storm that had come to change everything. "Admiral," Thaurin said softly, his voice barely a whisper, "it's not just a warship. It's a signal. A new dawn." The words hung in the air like a death knell. The Seraphians had underestimated humanity. And now, they were paying the price. Admiral Kor's mind raced as he stared out at the viewport, watching the growing shadows of two human warships in the distance. The Ascendant had already crippled half of the Seraphian fleet, and now, another warship, just as devastating, if not more so, was entering the fray. It felt like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final strike to land. Kor's thoughts whirled as he tried to make sense of the impossible. These weren't just warships. They were a manifestation of humanity's will, their technological prowess, and something far deeper, something older. He had seen advanced weapons, he had faced ancient races, but the sheer audacity of this, of humanity, shocked him to his core. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet," Thaurin said, his voice trained. "The pulse is still spreading. It's disabling everything within 100 light years. We can't even call for reinforcements." Kor's hands tightened into fists. They were isolated, vulnerable, and facing an enemy they could neither comprehend nor defeat with their current arsenal. His thoughts shifted to the second human warship now slowly advancing toward them. There was something unsettling about it. Its sheer presence rippled through space like a storm gathering on the horizon. "Bring it up," Kor ordered. The tactical officer quickly complied, pulling up a readout of the new warship. The ship's energy readings were off the scale, and yet it wasn't the power that drew Kor's attention. It was the design. It was unlike any ship he had seen before, not even remotely similar to Seraphian warcraft. It was angular and sleek, its surface dark and reflective, almost like a mirror in space. "It's not just a warship," Kor muttered to himself. "It's something more." Thaurin stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Admiral, the ship's interior composition, it's almost entirely made up of unknown elements. We can't even identify its material structure. It's as if it doesn't belong to any known civilization." Kor's mind spun as he stared at the ship. The Ascendant had been the harbinger, a symbol of humanity's arrival. But now, this second warship, this specter in the distance, was something entirely different. It felt alien, but not in the way the Seraphians understood. This ship was a warning. The future was unfolding before them, and the Seraphians were caught at the edge of it, powerless to stop the tide. "Admiral," the comms officer's voice interrupted Kor's dark thoughts. "We're receiving another transmission, but it's not from the Ascendant." Kor stiffened. "From where?" The officer hesitated, glancing nervously at the console. "It's from the new ship. It's—" "Admiral, you need to hear this. The air in the command deck grew thick with tension as the transmission came through. The voice was unmistakable, calm, composed, but chilling. "This is Captain Ilara Vance of the Ascendant, and I am transmitting on behalf of the Galactic Unity Fleet. You, Seraphian Empire, stand on the precipice of your extinction. Your time is past. The future belongs to humanity. You will bow to us or be erased from existence. This is the last warning." Kor's heart skipped a beat. The Ascendant, the sane ship, had become the face of this force, this unstoppable human presence. And now its voice, its message, was loud and clear. Humanity had come to take what was theirs. Kor's pulse raced as the weight of Ilara's words settled over him. The galactic peace the Seraphians had maintained for millennia was crumbling, not through war or rebellion, but through something more insidious, an arrival. And they had no idea how to stop it. "Target the new ship," Kor barked. "Prepare to fire." But as the orders left his lips, something strange happened. The new human warship, a ship that had, until this moment, remained at the edge of the battlefield, moved. It wasn't a simple movement. It was a shift in reality itself. The very space around it began to distort, bending as though the laws of physics were merely suggestions. A tremor shot through the deck, and the ship flickered, disappearing from view in the blink of an eye. For a split second, the entire fleet lost track of the ship. Then, without warning, a blinding pulse of energy erupted from the invisible warship, so powerful it sent a shockwave through Kor's own vessel, Ardent Judgment. The ship groaned, its systems failing, alarms blaring as the pulse overloaded their shields. The crew screamed, but Kor stood still, his eyes locked on the view screen where the Ascendant had once stood. The pulse faded, and the ship reappeared, now directly behind Ardent Judgment, its weapons primed, ready to strike. Kor's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the horrifying truth. The Ascendant and its twin warship were not just advanced technologies. They were sentient. They were alive. And they had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the Seraphians to make their move. The Ascendant wasn't just a weapon. It was the beginning of a new era. And the Seraphians had been its first casualty. The Ardent Judgment trembled violently, its hull groaning as another wave of energy surged through it. Admiral Kor clung to his console, feeling the ship's systems buckle under the strain. The entire command deck was in chaos. Panic and confusion spread like wildfire. Lights flickered, alarms shrieked, and the once pristine silence of space now seemed to echo with the suffocating weight of inevitability. "Status report," Kor barked, forcing his voice to rise above the noise. The tactical officer, her face pale and drenched in sweat, frantically worked the console. "We've lost primary weapon systems. Admiral, shields are at 12% and falling. Engines are offline. The pulse from the human ship, it's targeting our core. We won't last more than." Her voice cut off as the ship shook again, a brutal jolt that sent several crew members sprawling. Kor's eyes narrowed. They were on the verge of collapse, every second dragging them closer to total annihilation. He could feel the weight of humanity's relentless assault pressing down on them like a vice. The Ascendant, now joined by its ghostly twin, had proven far more powerful than anything they had ever faced. The transmission from Captain Ilara Vance still echoed in his mind, like a death sentence. "Bow to us or be erased from existence." Humanity had made their intentions clear. There was no mercy in their words, no room for negotiation. And yet, something about their presence gnawed at him. They were not invincible, not in the way the Seraphians had expected. These ships, these humans, they were more than mere conquerors. They were something else entirely. But what? Before he could dwell on it further, another voice broke through the static. "Admiral, the Ascendant has. It's deploying something." Kor turned sharply. Deploying what? The officer hesitated, fingers trembling over the console. I don't know. It's some kind of structure. It's appearing on the hull of the ship. A massive energy grid. It's expanding rapidly. Kor's heart skipped a beat. They weren't just attacking. They were preparing something. And whatever it was only a matter of time before it would be aimed directly at them. The main viewport flickered, and the distortion from the Ascendant's energy field rippled across the stars. Kor's gaze locked on the massive crystalline structure now emerging from the ship. It expanded like the tendrils of some ancient beast, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The energy it emitted felt different. Not like a weapon, but like a force, a presence that was reaching out across the fabric of space itself. "Admiral, we've lost full communication," Thurin said, his voice tight with panic. "We can't send or receive signals anymore. Whatever that thing is, it's disrupting everything. It's destabilizing the fabric of reality." A sinking feeling washed over Kor. This wasn't just a weapon. It was something far worse. Humanity wasn't just here to conquer. They were here to remake the universe in their own image. And they had the means to do it. The Ascendant wasn't just using firepower. It was changing the very laws of physics, bending them to its will. And as Kor watched, the energy grid expanded further, casting a shadow over the battlefield. He could see it now, streaks of light arcing outward, distorting space, tearing apart stars, and warping the very stars themselves. The crew of Ardent Judgment fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief as the energy grid from the Ascendant spread outward. It wasn't just an attack, it was a shift that threatened to erase everything in its path. "Admiral, what are we facing?" Thurin whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the collapsing ship. Kor stood frozen, his mind working at a frantic pace. The truth was slowly becoming clear. Humanity was not merely a threat. They were a force of nature. The Ascendant and its twin were not simply ships. They were embodiments of a new reality, a new order that existed outside the bounds of what the Seraphian Empire had ever known. Kor's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The energy grid had expanded far beyond what he thought possible. It was more than just a weapon. It was a barrier, a boundary that kept them locked in this space. And every minute, it was growing stronger, pushing them further from any hope of escape. And then, through the chaos, the transmission from Captain Ilara Vance returned, slicing through the static. Her voice was cold, devoid of pity. "You have witnessed the birth of a new era, Admiral Kor. The universe as you know it is over. You will be the first to experience its destruction." The transmission cut off abruptly, but the words lingered like a death knell, ringing in Kor's mind. The reality of their situation was undeniable. The Seraphian Empire had been defeated, not by firepower, but by the very fabric of space itself. Humanity had not only arrived, they had remade the rules. Kor knew that this was the end. There was no escape, no hope. He turned slowly, his face set in grim determination. The Ascendant had shattered their veil of invincibility. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Kor's hands clenched around the command console, his mind racing faster than his thoughts could keep up. The once mighty Ardent Judgment was now a crippled husk, its systems flickering, life support struggling to maintain its crew, while the stars outside had begun to bend and twist. The human warship, the Ascendant, and its ghostly twin were no longer just ships. They were harbingers, reshaping space itself, forcing the universe to kneel before their will. With every passing moment, the energy grid from the Ascendant expanded, a monstrous lattice of power spreading further across the battlefield. Space itself was warping, twisting into an alien geometry that made Kor's stomach churn. The laws of physics had become mere suggestions. Gravity had weakened in some areas, while time itself seemed to stretch, pulling the Seraphian fleet's movements into a sickening crawl. We can't move, Admiral. We're stuck." Thurin's voice trembled through the chaos. "The Ascendant's energy grid, it's locking us in place. We can't even escape into warp speed." Kor's mind flashed to the one advantage they had left: their weapons. Their remaining long-range cannons had enough firepower to breach most defenses, but against the Ascendant's power, they felt like the flailing attempts of a dying species. "How long until we lose complete power?" Kor demanded, his voice harsh, strained by the weight of the inevitable. "Minutes, at most," came the answer. The Seraphian Empire, the dominant force in the galaxy for millennia, was on the verge of collapse. Kor couldn't escape the crushing reality. Humanity had not only outgunned them, but outthought them, outclassed them in every conceivable way. Suddenly, the communications officer's voice cut through the static of the decaying ship. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Ascendant. It's not Elara." Kor's heart skipped a beat. Not Elara. Who else could it be? The screen flickered, and the hauntingly calm voice of a new figure filled the air. "This is Lieutenant Cale Vance. I have taken command of the Ascendant. Your defeat was inevitable, Admiral Kor. Humanity has already reclaimed the galaxy. This is not a war. This is the reckoning." Kor's mind spun. The name Vance. It sent a wave of confusion through him. Was this Captain Elara's kin? A younger officer, perhaps? But why would they allow a subordinate to speak for them? Or was this part of a deeper strategy? Was humanity this advanced? "We are not here to annihilate you," Cale continued, his voice growing cold. "We are here to liberate you. You will be spared for now, but only if you surrender. All that you know will be rewritten in the image of our civilization. You will become part of the galactic unity, or you will be forgotten. The choice is yours, Admiral." The screen went blank, and Kor, numb with disbelief, stood still for a moment, unsure how to respond. Had they really given him an option? A choice? His eyes turned slowly to the viewport, where the Ascendant and its twin were positioned like gods, gazing down upon their fallen adversaries. They were not just invincible, they were condescending. Humanity had shown them mercy, but only because they saw the Seraphians as little more than an inconvenience, a footnote in their inevitable rise. Kor felt the weight of his people's history bearing down on him. The Seraphian Empire had been built on the idea of their superiority, their strength, and now they were at the mercy of these humans, these creatures who had turned the galaxy upside down in the span of weeks. No, not even weeks, days. His fingers twitched. He knew what needed to be done. He could feel the spark of defiance rising within him, no matter how futile it might seem. "Prepare the last reserves," Kor ordered, his voice low, steady. "If we're going to fall, let's make them remember who we were." He moved quickly, barking orders to his crew, activating the Seraphian fleet's remaining weapons and shields. The ardent judgment had been crippled, but it wasn't dead yet. The last strike, the final stand. It would come from them. It would come from the remnants of an empire that had once ruled the galaxy. As the remaining Seraphian ships prepared for one final push, Kor's gaze fell upon the stars once more. They were no longer distant objects to be admired or studied. They were his legacy, the remnants of a dying civilization. The last pulse of hope surged within Kor's chest, and as the ardent judgment's engines hummed one final time, he whispered, "Let them see the true strength of Seraphian resolve." A surge of power flooded the ship. The weapons systems were back online. But would it be enough? Would this last desperate strike even leave a mark against the might of humanity? Kor didn't know. He didn't care. The time for retreat was over. This was their final chance, against insurmountable odds, against a force they couldn't comprehend. And for the first time in his life, Admiral Kor understood. It wasn't about winning. It was about defiance. Admiral Kor's breath came in short, ragged bursts as he stared at the tactical readout. The last of their weapons were charging, a desperate gasp of defiance against the overwhelming tide of humanity's might. The ardent judgment and its sister ships, crippled and outclassed, were all that remained of the Seraphian fleet. The stars themselves seemed to waver around them, the very fabric of space warping under the weight of the Ascendant's energy grid. Kor had no illusions left. He knew the odds. The Ascendant had already proven its power, bending the laws of physics and crushing any hope of resistance. Humanity had shown them mercy, but it was a mercy that came with the price of total subjugation. Still, despite the grim reality pressing down on them, Kor's resolve hardened. If they were to fall, they would make their enemies remember why they had once ruled the galaxy. All remaining ships, prepare for the final offensive. Kor ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. We will fight until the last spark. This is not just for us. It's for everything we've built. Tharin stood by his side, looking pale but resolute. Admiral, we're outgunned. We can't possibly. I don't care, Kor snapped, his eyes burning with defiance. We will strike, even if it's the last thing we do. The bridge crew worked quickly, initiating the final barrage. The energy reserves, depleted and unstable, were channeled into every remaining weapon they had. The Seraphian warships lined up for a desperate final assault, their weapons primed and ready to unleash a storm. The hum of the weapons charging filled the room, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like the calm before a storm, the eye of a hurricane, where everything slowed, and all that mattered was the next moment, the next move. Kor could feel it in his bones. The fight would be over soon, and they would either burn out gloriously or fade into oblivion. Then the Ascendant and its twin shifted. Space warped again, a subtle distortion, as if the universe itself bent in response to the human warships. Kor felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Admiral, they're doing something, the tactical officer stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. It's not another weapon. It's a... But before he could finish, the view screen crackled with static, and the voice of Lieutenant Kel Vance filled the air once more. You do not understand, Admiral Kor. Kel's voice was cold and final. You will never understand. The war is over. What you have fought for no longer matters. What humanity seeks is beyond your comprehension. But we will give you one last chance. Surrender now, and you may have a place in the new order. Resist, and your extinction will be swift. Kor felt his heart hammering against his chest, but he stood tall. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something deeper, something that would echo in the galaxies long after their ashes had settled. With a final defiant command, he slammed his fist onto the control panel. Fire. The remaining ships unleashed a barrage of energy, a storm of desperate destruction that shot across the cosmos. But before the weapons could reach their target, something impossible happened. The Ascendant and its twin glowed with an overwhelming intensity, and then the energy storm from the Seraphian fleet vanished. The weapons flickered out of existence mid-flight, as if they had been swallowed by the very air around them. Kor's breath caught in his throat as the screens blinked with shocking clarity. The weapons, the ships, the galaxy, everything seemed to freeze in time. His heart stopped, and for one horrifying moment, he realized that this wasn't just a battle. It wasn't just about victory or defeat. Humanity had already won, and what came next was something far beyond anything he could have imagined. The Ascendant was not merely a warship, it was a force of creation and destruction. The weapons of the Seraphians were no longer necessary because they had transcended warfare itself. And then, with the flicker of the energy grid, everything shifted. A wave of change spread across the cosmos. Stars flickered, planets shuddered. The very fabric of reality, of the universe, had been rewritten in that instant. The final transmission came through, but it wasn't from Kale. It was from Captain Ilara Vance, her voice softer but imbued with an almost prophetic calm. The war is over, Admiral Kor. But this is only the beginning. Humanity does not seek conquest, it seeks transformation. What we offer you now is not death, but rebirth. Surrender, and you will be part of something far greater than anything you ever dreamed. The choice, as always, is yours. The screen went dark, and the stars returned to their natural rhythm. But Kor knew in every fiber of his being, that nothing would ever be the same again. The Seraphians had fought, they had resisted, but they had been defeated by something beyond their understanding. Humanity had not come to conquer, they had come to change the very essence of existence itself. And in that moment, Kor understood the truth. They weren't just fighting a war, they were witnessing the birth of a new galaxy, a new universe. As the ardent judgment's power finally sputtered out, Kor stood in the stillness of the bridge, his people scattered and broken. There was no glory in this death, no redemption. But there was a strange peace, a quiet understanding. Humanity had won. The galaxy had been remade. And the Seraphian Empire, once proud and powerful, was but a footnote in the new history of the stars.